Hello and welcome to episode 24 of Mjolnir the Movies. I'm David Yorkshire, and with me as ever are Neil and James. Hello to you two.
Hello.
Hello.
And this week we're going to be looking at the 1989 Joe Dante film The Burbs, starring Tom Hanks, Carrie Fisher, Bruce Dern, and Corey Feldman.
In that era when you wanted to actually go and see a Tom Hanks movie,
Yes. Yeah, it's
when he meant something.
When
hard
he
to
could
imagine
sell a
that.
film just with his name.
Yeah. Do you know he's got a net fortune now of something like $390 million?
Wow.
That's how big he was when this movie came out. He was huge.
Yeah, and known just really as a comedy actor at this time as well.
As
Yeah.
I understand it, his name was sort of just made from another film right before this was released, wasn't it?
Which one was that? Was it Big?
I'd have to look it up again, but I was reading about the original ending. We'll remind everybody that you should have watched the film, so we'll talk about spoilers throughout this. But the original ending for this was a lot worse for his character. And they rewrote it because it was such a big name and he was selling the film and they thought people would be upset by it.
Yeah, well, we'll get on to the original ending and also an alternative ending as well, because a number of endings were tried. Would you like to take us through the plot first of all? Would someone, for people who haven't seen it and who don't want to watch it, although I do recommend that people watch it because I think that Joe Dante is quite an underrated director in a way. Would anyone like to take us through the plot first of all?
I would say anybody watching this movie or planning on watching this movie should know that this is a film for the everyday average guy who's in his mid-30s, who's living in suburbia, and he sees a series of events that unfold in front of him. And he's the sort of moral arbiter of the street he lives in. And he takes this leap to defend his family and his neighbors from these strange neighbors that appear on the street one day. They just move in suddenly. And I think we've all had those experiences if you live in suburbia. But not only that, it's a very, very funny film as well. It's like a mix between a horror movie, Gremlins, and a strange comedy.
Yeah, it's typical Joe Dante, actually, isn't it? I mean, you can really compare it with the film Gremlins and Gremlins 2, of course, which he directed.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of references to the Gremlins in the movie as well. There's
Yeah,
like a cereal box with a gremlin on the front.
That's right, and it's called Freaks, isn't it? The
That's
cereal
right, yeah.
box, which
And
we
Corey
sort
Feldman
of
too.
yes, that's right, and also one of the garbage disposal guys
That's right. Yeah.
is in Gremlins as well. Is the guy who drives the combine harvester or something like that, isn't it?
That's right.
The drives, yeah. But Joe Dante, I think that he's very good at this kind of mixture of fantasy and horror and comedy. Although this doesn't quite capture the same horrific element as Gremlins, I think. But it's still there. It's still very much there. You get it right at the beginning. I thought that the beginning was very interesting. Because it starts off with this view of the world.
From the Universal logo.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
But then, of course, it becomes the real world, and it pans further and further into America, and then further and further down onto this cul-de-sac. So we're going from the global to the insular.
Yeah.
And it plays a lot, does this film, with this idea of the insularity of the suburban cul-de-sac.
And interestingly enough, that actually was the first Universal introduction to a movie where the film was set on the globe of the Universal logo. And other times it cut from the globe that spins around to the movie, but this one actually kept on and zoomed into it. So the movie is effectively set in the Universal world. Now, the film was filmed on a Universal ride. It's a part of a ride. It's like a haunted house ride or something like that. And you walk around the street. So it's a film about Universal Studios and people living there. And it was the first transition from the globe into the actual setting of the movie. So that's an interesting little point.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very much so. And I think also what's interesting is that when you get that shot that comes down, it's almost a continuous shot, although it's not really continuous because you get certain cuts as you get further and further in. But it looks roughly like a continuous shot. It's meant to look like one. And then you come down onto the street level and you come past the houses. And of course, there are all these perfect houses and everything. And then you get to the Klopek house, which is the people who've just moved in, who are very strange. Then you get this horror music But the only difference, really, when you look between the Klopek house and the other houses, is that it's a bit unkempt.
And it wasn't them that caused it.
Mm.
'Cause they
Shabby
didn't get
paint.
into it.
That's right. They've not long since moved in.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that it's out of kilter with the rest of the street. And
Like the rotten tooth.
yeah, that's right. It's the rotten tooth. But yet it's sort of done ironically because all that's wrong with it actually is the imperfection. And so it's a bit of a satire on the suburban way of life, which is what this film is in part.
Yeah. It's like in every street's got that house, and the person that lives there just a little bit smellier than the rest of them. Every street's got one, and that's just that street. And they're just the unfortunate people who move into an old rickety house, and suddenly they're under suspicion for not cleaning up their yards days without moving in and painting it up. I mean, they could have been planning that, but that's suburbia for you. You instantly see neighbors moving in, and you judge them instantly, and that's why I like the movie so much, and it makes me laugh because there's just little things that happen that have happened to me, like dogs pooing in your garden, and how crazy that drives me when it shouldn't really. But you just want perfection continuously. Everybody's got to have the cleanest garden, the shiniest car, or the biggest tree, or whatever.
Yeah, although interestingly, with the tree in the Klopek houses, it's dead.
Yeah.
That's that's another little thing that sort of it's a prelude, if you like, to what's going to happen later on in the film. The other thing is that when in that scene, Tom Hanks, who's the neighbor of the Klopeks, walks across, and as soon as he puts his foot on the Klopek house's territory, all of a sudden there's this eerie wind suddenly gets up. And so you have that semi-supernatural aspect to it. But equally, it's a comic moment at the same time because the music is so overwrought. It's such a cliche of horror music that it becomes quite ridiculous. Of course, at this time, we know that Tom Hanks is a comedy actor as well.
The music in this is actually really well done. I think that the soundtrack is fantastic for all the comedy moments and the spooky moments. So it really managed to set the atmosphere well. Even the part with the little dog Princess, the tiny one, where it has the dog's bark echoing through the music as part of it.
You know, it's the same dog from Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, that's right, in the pit.
Precious. Yeah.
So it's Princess and Precious.
Yeah, that's the same dog. There's tons of little references in the Burbs like that. There's a scene where you hear the generator starting up, and the camera pans round, and you clearly see the DeLorean underneath a sheet.
Really?
It's absolutely full of little Easter eggs like that. It's riddled full of them.
That's right, and then when they go to the Klopek's house for the first time, there's actually a noose as a shadow in the background, just as if no mentions made of this. Because for us, we see the shadow, but you think that means then if there's a shadow, other people in the room must be able to see this noose in the open. but that's just there for the viewers to sort of unconsciously spook them, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, there's tons of little things like that. It's absolutely riddled full of little things by Joe Dante.
Very clever.
Little sort of references you'll only notice if you really watch it a few times.
One thing I thought was great about it, giving it the horror atmosphere, was how it's contained entirely to this tiny area and small number of houses. The whole thing.
Yeah.
You think it's actually quite an involved story, but they've done it over just a handful of houses, and so a lot of them you don't even see it inside.
Yeah,
and it gave me this a reminder of the original Halloween. How what made it interesting was how that street, once it starts kicking off, is how everything's contained to this street. And it gives you that claustrophobic, very personal feeling. But this even goes further than it. You don't have the school and the shops. It's just entirely within the street. People come and go, but you stay in the street.
And that's how it is in real life, though. That's the beauty of it. That's how street rivalry really is. It stays in the street, and that's it. No one cares. No one cares outside that. It's that contained.
This is what I was talking about with the beginning, when you come down from really outside, and right down. So out from the global, right into this street, and suddenly you have this aura of insularity. And if you notice, a lot of people in this film make excuses for not going out of that street. Like, for example, Corey Feldman's girlfriend in the film. She wants to go to the cinema, but Corey Feldman said, no, it's better here. There's more happening here than in the films. And equally, Tom Hanks, his wife wants him to go out to the lake on holiday and everything. And he makes excuses to stay in the cul-de-sac again.
Yeah.
And so
he just wants to be left alone.
That's right, yeah.
That's right.
And so the
other guy
these people have become very insular.
That's right. And there's the guy who's always egging on, Peterson, or Tom Hanks' character. He basically avoids his wife and he stays in the street and decides not to go to his mother-in-law's. They're all at it.
That's right, Art, yeah. And at the end, of course, he's terrified that his wife's come back.
That's right. Just in time.
Yeah.
You notice how every time he appears, he's in a costume. Like every time he appears, he's got some like worker's outfit on or like a jumpsuit with like eye makeup on. Every scene he's in, he's got some costume on related to like the next scene. He comes out dressed as a golfer in full golf outfit, and the next scene he's got like an electrician's outfit on, and the next scene he's got a boiler suit on with like ninja stripes on it. Every time he's a different character.
It's because he's sort of the eternal man-child, isn't he?
Yeah,
That's his character, and he loves dressing up almost like a child would do in these different costumes for different roles. In fact, this film relies heavily on archetypes.
Yeah, and the old Vietnam vet who falls off the roof because he gets a scare. They just feel like old men who are just looking for like a bit of fun. All they want is like a bit of fun and adventure for the weekend while their wives are away.
Yeah, the archetypes you've got there. You've got this Vietnam veteran who you just mentioned called Mark Rumsfeld. I couldn't help but think that he must be named after Donald Rumsfeld.
I was wondering that myself.
We know him, of course, because under the Bush administration, he became Secretary of Defense. But he'd already been a Secretary of Defense under, I think it was Gerald Ford, if I remember rightly. So he must have been named after him. And he's very much this parody of a Republican neocon, really, isn't he? And war veteran. He's at odds with this other guy, Walter Selznick. And, with the name Selznick, I would imagine he's a Jewish gentleman and therefore probably very left-leaning. And I think that there's a whiff of lavender about him. Because he's
got the lines in that movie, that guy. When he pats the guy in the back, he says, "So what are you, Catholic?" And he slaps him on the back. The ginger kid.
The hands.
Yeah, the hands, that's it. He was like, Catholic?
That's right, yeah. He's, when he says Hans, he said, good Christian name.
Yeah.
Because Hans Christian Andersen.
Yeah, that's right, yes. But we'll come on to that theme in a bit. But yes, the archetypes. So you've got the man-child, you've got this veteran, you've got this sort of pinko Jew, if you like. You've got Tom Hanks, who's really the everyman character, as he usually is.
Yeah.
At least at this stage of his acting career, anyway.
You got Carrie Fisher, the sort of suffering wife who's a bit wiser than him, trying to tell him to do something sensible.
She was surprisingly still quite nice looking at that age. Where did it go wrong for her? She looked okay, I suppose. There.
Didn't she have an alcohol and drug problem? I think that's
when did that start? Was that like year after?
Oh, I don't know. I don't really keep up with
celebrity gossip.
She basically snorted coke more or less all the way through her career. If you watch the Star Wars Holiday Special, you should see her on that coked up to the heavens.
Another reason why they buried that one, apart from the fact it was god awful.
Yes, and apparently Lucas tries to deny that he has anything to do with that, but apparently the guy who directed it always consulted George Lucas about, is this all right? Yes, it's perfectly fine. Go on. which shows that Lucas was already in decline by that point.
Well, I've heard a lot of people say that his efforts were only because of the contributions of other people really around him at the time, and that's why once he was let off the leash with nobody to balance him out, we got the prequel films, which were absolutely god-awful, and they didn't exist as far as I'm concerned.
They're better than the new ones, though. I mean, in hindsight, I would take them all back.
It's kind of like saying, though, a slap in the face is better than a kick in the teeth. I'd rather have neither.
Yeah, true.
That's true. Yeah. Now, in contradistinction to the suburbanites, these protagonists, we have the antagonist, the Klopeks. What did you make of these?
Do we have to ask this question?
I think we do.
Yeah, because everybody knows what's coming up. They're going, don't say it. Don't say it. Are they supposed to be Irishmen?
Well, the clue is basically when I've forgotten who asks it now. I think it's Rumsfeld. He asks, "Is that a Slavic name?"
That's right. Yeah, it's Rumsfeld. He was the
said,
inquiring one in that whole visit.
Yeah, and the elder Klopek says no.
Yeah.
Which kind of gives it away.
He's a famous German actor, isn't he, for doing crazy facial expressions and just having these monologues that meant nothing. That just went on for like minute after minute. He's a really famous comedian in Germany, apparently.
Oh.
Yeah, he is. And I've forgotten his name now. It's Brother something or other. It's a very odd name.
Brother Theodore.
Brother Theodore, that's right, yeah.
That's right. He was Ruben Klopek.
Ruben Klopek, yeah.
A very unusual sort of look about him altogether.
Well, and there's a thing as well. Ruben. What kind of a name is Ruben?
Peruvian? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Japanese, was it?
Bolivia, something like that.
So it's interesting that Joe Dante, who of course is quite friendly with Steven Spielberg, would throw these obviously, how can we say, I'll just come out with it, obviously Jewish characters in there.
Yeah.
Because there's the joke, of course, about a Christian name as well.
Yeah. Slavic reference.
Yes, exactly. When it said no, there's not.
It was like his response is like no, like he's really disgusted by it.
Yeah,
like it's the worst thing you could possibly. How fucking dare you call me Slavic?
That's right, because I actually researched the name Klopek, and it does originally come from. It's a Czech name originally, and there are various variants of it around Austria, Germany, Hungary, that kind of area, so Central Europe, as well as, of course, in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. But there's a very close name, which is Kopek, and that's a Jewish name.
Oh.
They just added an L in, the sneaky fuckers.
But to say that, no, it's not Slavic, well, and of course, they're not speaking in a Slavic accent. They're speaking in a German accent, which means that they're probably speaking Yiddish.
You just can't avoid it. We have to talk about this every single podcast we do now. It's just,
I know,
there when it's there
in your face, because there is an awful lot of signaling going on in this film. Now, we've got Corey Feldman in this film.
This was after he was raped on Lost Boys set.
And apparently he had Bubbles visit
Same
them
names
as well.
keep cropping up.
He had Michael Jackson's monkey visit them apparently regularly.
Yeah.
And apparently the monkey had to be banned from set eventually because it used to cover his entire caravan or the trailer with feces. So it had to be banned from set eventually. What bizarre people these are.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about Corey Feldman as well is that he, and don't forget that Corey Feldman is also Jewish, so it's not like they just prey on Gentiles or something like that.
No.
We have to mention that, I think, because Corey Haim, they preyed on him as well, and he was Jewish. One of the interesting lines that he has in the film is, "Don't go now, the pizza man's coming."
Pizza dude.
Oh, pizza dude, sorry. Pizza dude is coming, yes.
Yeah.
But there are 3 times when this obsession with the pizza dude is mentioned. And, of course, it does come. And there are pizzas everywhere. But it's quite bizarre, isn't it? When you realise, now looking back on it, how these things were foregrounded.
And the pizza dude line was ad-libbed. Corey Feldman apparently ad-libbed that line.
Didn't know he had that much talent.
No, it can't be ad-libbed because they actually have the pizza dude come, and he nearly gets crashed into by the.
But him saying that was ad-libbed at that, and I think there was another line he ad-libbed at the end as well. You know, something about how he describes how he likes the place right at the end. Partly so, anyway. That's the trivia I've read, that those lines were ad-libbed.
I find it strange because we actually see the pizza man come and deliver, and he nearly gets run into by the ambulance.
But he could have shouted, "Oh fuck, there's a truck coming."
Yeah, could have been that or any number of things. Maybe I don't know, but that apparently he ad-libbed that, at least that line. Maybe he wasn't to say that at that point.
No, but
because there was a writer's strike going on at the same time, so some things might have been ad-libbed.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It went on right up to the end of the film. The writer's strike.
It would be a very odd ad-lib for him to put in, though, wouldn't it?
I don't know what that says at all.
Well, I don't. I wouldn't look too much into that. I don't know. It would be too real to think that they were referencing something that's going on now.
He's just said the pizza dude because he knew there was a character who was meant to deliver the food there, so he just used the term pizza dude.
Well,
you encourage people to go and get a slice of pizza during the break or whatever.
Well, you're right. It would be sort of, it could be brushed off as coincidence. Unless you've seen the alternative ending that they filmed. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
You see, I'll be honest, right? I didn't even know there was.
I know about the alternative ending.
I'm kind of looking forward to hearing what you guys have got to say about it.
I know
that actually maybe just meet you and go and watch it quickly.
I know about the alternative ending that involves. Well, we can just say it because we've warned folk. I know it involves Tom's character dying. It was the more kind of grim version of it rather than him winning. It was a sort of surprise, we were actually evil all along, and he actually gets finished off. And that was one of the intended endings, which they changed, I think, because of Tom's fame and because he was seen as a sort of comedy nice guy actor, and they didn't really want to shock the audiences with the comedy nice guy headliner being killed off at the end.
Yeah, that ending I don't think was filmed, but there's another ending that was filmed. You can watch it on YouTube, actually.
All right.
And this alternative ending, it's quite similar to the one that went out. It's just that instead of Tom Hanks wrestling with Werner Klopek with the needle and everything, and him winning and then making a citizen's arrest, and then Klopek saying that, oh no, he's got it all wrong, he's gone mad and everything, and then they find the boot full of skulls that incriminates Werner. Instead of that, there's the wrestling scene with the needle where Werner tries to inject him in the ambulance. But his wife and the others, they open the back door and then they catch Werner, about to stick him with the needle and give him the lethal injection. But he gets arrested then. But he gives a speech after that, does Ruben Klopek. And it's actually a very funny speech. And so it's strange that they cut it out. And Werner Klopek, he says, but Mr. Peterson, you are not quite right about the suburbs. No, you take one step out of line. Paint your house the wrong shade of pink. You buy the wrong kind of car. You make one or two human sacrifices. Then, when you walk down the street, everybody says, oh, there goes the weirdo. And Peterson says, but why did you come here? And Werner says, I came as you did, for the quiet and the privacy, the good life, the convenient shopping with always plenty of ample free car parking. And everywhere I met only suspicion and distrust. And then young Hans Klopek says, it's true, in L.A. nobody said anything. So nobody said anything about human sacrifice in L.A.
Oh.
Do you get it? Do you get it?
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
So it's interesting because it's a very funny bit of the script, actually. I think, if you just take it as a normal bit of script, because it relies awful lot on irony, where it goes to the odd human sacrifice and this idea that LA is full of weirdos, and so nobody took any notice.
Well, the human sacrifice thing must have been they maybe want to push that more, because I know at the end they've got the car full of bones, and the thing about that is it's a lot more palatable to see some old dusty bones on screen. But in the older ending, they were also talking about having the garbage men. You see the funny pair, them dead in the car, and I think a couple of cheerleaders as well. So it was sort of really kind of making it more disturbing. There's no chance that you might think maybe these are bodies exhumed from a grave somewhere. These were people you just saw talking and joking on the screen earlier on, now dead in their car. Bringing in the human sacrifice more, I suppose, and the murder aspect.
Probably like the rating up a little bit for an ending like that. That's probably why they didn't do it. I don't think it was for any moral reasons. I just think they realized that they could get more people at the cinema if they made it a nice, happy ending.
Could be more palatable.
Like, because they want to make it more like Gremlins, make it like a comedy horror that everybody could go and see. I don't think Gremlins is really that high a rating, is it? 15 maybe?
Yeah, I think it was a 15. That's right.
But I don't imagine the Burbs was as high rated as age-wise as Gremlins, because the Gremlins was much more explicit with the violence and the horror aspect, wasn't it?
True, yeah.
That's true. This is pretty tamed down in comparison, isn't it?
I mean, the worst you get's a slight struggle and some bones, actually, when you think about it. The rest, it's also psychological tricks.
That's true. Yeah, it's very much in the old-fashioned kind of horror, isn't it? That kind of genre. And I think that there's a lot of referencing going on to that kind of old-fashioned horror in that I think it's self-referential in a way. It's referencing the industry that's gone, in that this sort of horror that was horrific many years earlier to this film is no longer horrific and can just be lampooned.
Although I would say there's definitely a lot of clever psychological tricks in these films, and even in this comedy, that probably get forgotten now when they kind of rush to shock people with nothing but a bit of red on screen.
Yeah. Now, coming on to sort of the how the effects are created, the comic and horrific effects are created, because you've just mentioned some of the little psychological things that are going on. I think that one of the nice things is when they go from that opening scene and then they start with the titles, and it's completely different. So they go from the nighttime into the daytime, where it's sunny, it's suburbia, everything's perfect, and people are mowing the lawns and watering the plants and that kind of thing. And it's picture perfect normality. And I think that that's something that Joe Dante does very well. He did it very well in Gremlins as well. This picture of middle-class suburbia that is seemingly perfect, apart from one or two odd things. But basically, it's a really sort of safe space. And you'll notice that there are no persons of color in it.
At all, like in any way. No, actually, the copper at the end.
Well, here's the thing about the copper at the end.
The clever black copper.
But is he? Is he that clever? Because actually what he's doing is he's defending the Klopex. Isn't it like the NAACP, where it's a black guy defending his Jewish masters?
Oh.
Thinking about it. Because he gets it completely wrong, of course, and he's defending the Klopex, that Werner Klopek is this wonderfully respectable doctor, and that these terrible white people have got it all wrong, and
tried to lynch him
terrible
almost.
Bigots. That's right, they're terrible bigots, and they're trying to lynch him and so on. And yet it turns it on its head, of course, this film. And this is the strange thing looking back at this film, in that it's turned on its head, and that the Klopex really are engaging in, well, according to the other filming of this film, engaging in ritual sacrifice.
Something I was listening to there when I was listening to you speak, it reminded me of a scene. It's a dream sequence Tom Hanks's character has, and he sees the doctor, and he's got a robe on, and it's stars, and it's moon and stars. It's like that gown Mickey Mouse wears with the sun and the stars and the moon symbols on it. And I remember reading years ago that was something that apparently they would dress Jewish people and Islamic people up in to make them stand out, so people would know that's one of those guys. They give them like moon and star symbols, so everybody would know what they were. Was that like some kind of reference? Because not many people really know that.
It could very well be.
So he's like the sort of outcast, or like the poor oppressed Jewish person who had to wear the the star and the moon symbols.
I thought maybe it was just a sort of a cult thing.
It could be. It
Wizard
could be a sort
robes
of
kind
a
of thing.
Disney sort of reference, but that's like where it originally comes from, apparently. Back in the olden days, if you were Jewish or Muslim, they'd force you to wear a star. Apparently, I'm not sure if this.
Because I think didn't
is.
Mickey Mouse wear something similar in
Yeah,
Fantasia?
yeah, that's what. Yeah, and that's where that came from. So I was wondering if that was maybe some kind of guy in the costume set or whatever who maybe knew this.
Could well be.
Of course,
Could well
Tom
be.
Hanks in The Dream does
Like-
get sacrificed in a weird occult ritual.
Yeah, yeah. Just really strange. There's lots of little things like that about this movie. Why do they have a furnace? Specifically just to burn bodies? Is a furnace like a reference, maybe?
Molech.
To something that, yeah, I'm trying to like dodge around this without saying it.
Well, I think we've gone pretty far with saying stuff here.
I
So
suppose.
yeah,
Well,
if it's a reference
it's
to
hard to-
certain allegations of ovening and so on.
Yeah,
It's hard to know if it's just straight up occult references, because the thing is, these things are steeped so much into the general culture by this point that it's hard to tell. I mean, Fantasia cartoon was a long time even before this, and they had Mickey Mouse in it, so somebody could have grown up watching Mickey Mouse and then did the costumes for this, and so the reference could actually be Mickey Mouse and wizards and say in Dungeons and Dragons rather than anything more. It's hard to know.
although thinking back on it, I think could it not just be that the people who made the movie are making out that these people are German, and Germans have furnaces in their basement because Germans were involved in the Holocaust, and the family is supposed to be German people.
I thought about that because Hans obviously dresses in very
Lederhosen
typically.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. He wears a very typically Bavarian costumes. But I find the naming of Reuben extremely odd.
I just thought the doctor. I thought that was like almost like a dwarf version of Mengele or something like that. That's the impression I got. It was like a stab at him and how he was actually like a little man. I just kind of see these things.
You could well be right.
The question I have.
Do you see the shadow? Like when you first see him, you see the big tall shadow. You think, oh fuck, he's going to be this big sort of Nazi doctor or something like that. And it pans at just this little dwarf guy who's barely the height of the banister.
Well, it's interesting actually because Henry Gibson, who plays him, one of his other big roles was as the Obergruppenführer in the Blues Brothers. In these, these American Nazis.
Oh, well, there we go then. Maybe I've uncovered something.
The question I would have for that house, though, is how did that furnace get there and set up? Like, you see, it's a massive lump of iron. So, was that there when they moved in? In which case, what on earth were the previous residents up to? Or did nobody notice when they got this giant furnace the size of a car delivered in what must have been a huge truck?
Do you remember the guy, though? Not Ruben, the old guy with the face. And he says there was a delivery van here all week. And it makes you wonder, was there? And they just didn't pay attention.
No, that is Reuben, the old guy.
Oh, okay, it is. Okay.
Yeah, Werner's the doctor.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, I just thought they were maybe trying to give us the nudge that these were German people. And that's what the bad people in the world are like. Germans who have hidden furnaces in their basements.
I thought maybe it was a kind of just a classic horror reference, because spooky furnaces and basements is a sort of classic when you think of Freddy Krueger with this. You know, there's references in that to furnaces, obviously, and it's kind of one of these things I think turns up quite a lot. Even in kids' horror, the sort of Goosebumps stuff, you know, there was spooky furnaces and basements.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there are lots of horror staples in the film, like when they're digging in the garden and there's the lightning on them. Because if you notice, the weather always suits the occasion, doesn't it, in the film?
And it changes very quickly.
That's right. And it's such a horror cliche, but it's used actually as a satire on the horror genre, and it's made ridiculous. That's what makes the comedy work, actually, because there are some of these things, especially when they go to the house for the first time and there's the swarm of bees that attack them, of course.
Not the bees.
That's right, not the bees. But you get that, like in the Amityville Horror with the flies.
The numbers,
so
when it goes from 669 to the 9 swings round to 6.
That's right, yeah.
Even though, logically, somebody in the street then must live at number 666 anyway, if there's a number 669.
That's right, yeah.
Only a couple of doors up the road.
Yeah. That's right. It's probably Walter Selnick or whatever.
Yeah, it must be something like that. It must be only just a couple of doors up from the Klopex.
Yeah. And of course, there's the bit where he puts his foot through the porch and everything. It's as though everything's against them as they're going up there. What makes the scene extremely comical is when you get the very close eye shots, almost like in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Where Sergio Leone, he creates the tension by focusing in on the eyes.
That's right. I know what you can
looking
imagine.
Intently and everything, and then it focuses onto the dog's
That's
eyes
right.
and everything.
And is it just me, or is it? He made it almost look like the dog was all tense and really staring at the people. It was brilliant.
That's right, yeah. So this is what I like about Joe Dante, is that he does have that knack for creating that mixture of comedy and horror and so on. I think this is just as good as Gremlins, to be quite honest.
Oh, it's interesting because you're saying it worked so well as a mix, but apparently the original critical reviews were terrible. And you can see review after review for professionals saying how it's terrible, it's all hit and miss, none of it works, 1 out of 5 stars, yet the audiences loved it and it made a lot of money, and it's now considered a cult classic.
Well, this just shows how little critics know about films. I mean, how many of these critics have actually been filmmakers?
Exactly.
I mean, I used to respect Alex Cox's opinion, but he was a director, so he'd actually been involved in the actual art of filmmaking, so he knew something about it. A lot of these people simply don't. I mean, we always go on about Roger Ebert, who knows absolutely nothing, seemingly, about the art of filmmaking. And he's just basically a waffler. He's a hack.
Nods along
He's dead
at
now,
some...
of course, but...
Nods along at some big hits that he knows is safe bet and rubbishes ones that are easy to punch.
Yeah, that's right. But he doesn't even understand the films on their own terms. He doesn't understand what's going on in the films. And this is the problem with a lot of critics. Well, I mean, this is back in the day, of course, because now pretty much all the critics are bought out in any case. And they're on contracts basically to sell films rather than actually critique them.
Mark Kermode.
Oh, awful.
Absolutely awful. He's a detestable cunt. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that word, but he really is. He deserves that word.
Yeah, he does. He does. There's no need for apologies there, Neil, at all. He is a cunt.
Yeah, I don't use that word a lot, but every time Mark Kermode comes up, I just can't help myself. He's a truly awful person.
We should call him Mark Commode from now on.
Yeah.
He should be shit on at every given opportunity. But anyway. But yeah, this is indeed the problem with these critics, in that most of them are bought or they don't know what they're talking about. We've seen this, of course, very recently with a lot of the superhero films that get amazing reviews.
Weeks before they're even released.
Yeah.
That's right.
10 out of 10, one after the other for some of them.
100%.
Even if we ignore everything else and look at it from a left point of view, it's still a mediocre film. And it's still just a kind of unremarkable superhero action flick. And they're giving it 10 out of 10, ranking it up there with the best films ever made. Real art.
Yeah. If you go to Google right now and type in top 10 comedies, you probably won't see the Burbs in there. You'll see some crap made recently. You seem to see a Marvel movie in every fucking category of movies there is. Type in top 10 horror, top 10 sci-fi. You'll see at least one Marvel in every category. Adventure, comedy, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I've always been a bit suspicious of these top 10, top 100 lists, is how front-loaded they are for time. You know, you look at these top 100 books, top 100 films or music, you'll see a lot of whatever was made yesterday is really high up and everything else sort of trails behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you see, the thing about the Burbs is that it's got a great plot for a start. It's not a grand plot or anything like that, but it works. And the great catch is at the end where you think that the suburbanites, especially because you assume a liberal perspective, you think that the suburbanites are the ones who are wrong, and they're not. It's actually these outsiders who are really evil, but you're tricked into thinking towards the end that they're not. That they're actually being oppressed by these sort of Republican type suburbanites
And all the
who
suburbanites
are conservative.
and they're all kind of decent people, basically, the suburbanites.
Yeah.
That's right. Because although they have their flaws and everything, they are genuinely decent people. And the great thing is that even though they're caricatures in a way, you can identify with them at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got that blend just right as Joe Dante, in that they're not just there as figures of fun, they're quite well rounded at the same time, so that you actually care about them.
Yeah, and all of the characters, every single one of us could relate to, all the male characters especially. We've all got thermal imaging goggles and binoculars. Every single one of us has got some cool gadget or man toy. We all wish we could be young again and go on Scooby-Doo type adventures. And this is what this movie is. It's basically Scooby-Doo for adults. We've still got to go back to a 9 to 5 at the end of the weekend.
Do you know one of the strange, or not strange, but at least interesting things about the film is that Joe Dante could easily have picked on the character of Rumsfeld, I should say, a lot more, because he's like that Republican archetype that all the left now love to hate, and they would have ridiculed him to death. But yet he's quite sympathetic. And although he has this much younger wife who's a bit of a bimbo and everything, she's actually very loyal to him.
Yeah.
And she seems nice when you actually see her talk and how she acts. She seems like a nice person.
That's right. And so
they made her nice looking, but they didn't make fun of her. They didn't turn her into a bimbo who screams for nothing. Although she does scream at the toupee, but they didn't take any low blows on her.
No, that's right. And I think that's one of the things that's refreshing about Joe Dante, in that he doesn't pick soft targets, and he doesn't do what you expect nowadays of a film director. You expect film directors now to set up this evil rightist archetype and basically do him to death.
Yeah, they would have had him look stupid non-stop and humiliated, and they'd have had the wife run away from him. They'd had one thing after another. They'd have hinted that she was cheating or something, they'd have done something like that to constantly humiliate the character.
That's right.
You notice the scene where he gets a radio call. He's trying to get them to use the radio and contact him. And they eventually do. They contact him and say, "Oh, we're ready to go." And you see the joy in his face. He's playing like Army as a grown-up. And he's this old man. He's a military vet. He's got a beautiful wife and a massive house. He's like having the time of his life.
Yeah.
And it's really good fun to watch it.
Especially when you see them going over the fence. And he's on the radio and they're talking about what's happening that he can clearly see, because the way the camera's set up, he can see them climbing over the fence, and he's talking to the radio. "What are you doing now?" Turned away from it deliberately so he has to hear it from the radio.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the character is that he's always away from the action. You assume that he's quite cowardly for a while. But then when Hans Klopek tries to get away at the end, he rushes at him and tackles him and arrests him and grabs him by the throat and brings him to the police.
Yeah.
He is a good character in the end. He's ridiculous, as they all are, for the purposes of the comedy, because obviously it is a comedy, but he's not made into a fool.
No. There's one line that just makes me laugh when the binman says to him, "Who's going to clean all this up?" And he goes, "You're going to clean it up because you're a bin man." And it cracks me up so much. It's such a horrible thing to say to someone.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he is terribly insensitive at the same time.
Yeah.
But equally, he does get humiliated in certain places, like when he comes with the hose pipe to try to spray Tom Hanks and his friend Art, and he rushes out with the hose pipe, and suddenly it jerks back as it reaches its extension point, and he falls on his ass. So that's a great. And I think that Bruce Dern is a really good actor in this. To be honest.
And even when he's in the house, he's actually given a slight vindication, but well, true vindication, because he's the pushy, suspicious one, and it turns out his suspicions are right to investigate and interrogate these people.
That's right, yeah.
So he's made out, at first you think it's sort of a cringy moment as he's pushing, and then later on you go, oh, well, he was right, because they actually are all murderers.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. So this is what I say. It could have very easily have taken the easy way out, this film, because it actually says that the outsider is bad. And we don't expect it these days, even though that this is basically what our old folk tales told us for centuries, that the outsider is very probably antagonistic to you. This reaffirms those old tales, but goes against the grain of the new ones that have come in since the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s.
Sort of classic fairy tales reinvented for the modern age.
Yeah, very much so. And unless anyone else has got anything to add, I think that might be a good place to wrap it up.
Well, I can't really think of anything else to add to it.
Yeah, let's leave it there.
Well, it's it's a very good film, and I thoroughly recommend it. Yeah, and so please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and we'll hopefully see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.